When it comes to sitcoms, it's not often that they end in a satisfying way. Shows like Big Bang Theory, Friends, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, How I Met Your Mother, they all follow the same formula where the show rises in popularity, then ratings start to drop so they marry off characters. Then ratings drop a bit more so someone has a baby. At that point, they run out of ideas. So they squeeze out another season or two before the "and then everyone grew up, moved away and moved on with their lives" ending. It's not necessarily bad, it's just very unimaginative and formulaic. What about shows like The Simpsons, American Dad, Family Guy? Well, they're not written seriously enough that an ending is even considered. So trying to manufacture some sort of finale just by changing the status quo would be incredibly jarring. Sure, they could have endings. People have speculated for years on how The Simpsons will end, usually with Grandpa or Mr. Burns dying, Bart and Lisa growing up, or Maggie finally talking, all of which feel very un-Simpsons-like. When these shows do end, it's more than likely that these series just won't be renewed and their final episode will be an episode just like any other. Ultimately, the difficulty of ending a sitcom comes from one thing: finality. Unlike other genres, sitcoms rarely have plot or goals, some sort of story within the show that can come to a conclusion and allow the show to end along with it. Lord of the Rings ends when they destroy the One Ring. King of the Hill ends with an episode about Bobby inspecting meat and then everyone has a barbecue.
Well, Dad, it looks like this is the last one.
Oh, you're just getting started, Bobby. You'll be grilling your whole life.
Just like you.
Yep.
Yep.
See what I mean? There's no finality. It's an agreement that even though more stories are happening in theory, we're not going to get to see them. Which is fine, but it's not satisfying. There are of course exceptions to every rule, which has been a very long-winded way to bring up Futurama's 2013 finale, Meanwhile, which is one of the best endings to a sitcom ever, in my opinion. The episode centers around the professor's new device, a button that sends you 10 seconds back in time. But when Fry breaks the device, time is frozen in a single moment, with only Fry and Leela unaffected. They then live their entire lives in the frozen time, getting married, traveling the world, and growing old together, until the professor shows up at the end and says he can undo everything by sending them back to before he conceived of the time button. But they won't remember anything that's happened.
What do you say? Want to go around again?
I do.
There are two reasons why this is such a great end to the series. That they won't remember anything that's happened means they're doomed to repeat the exact actions that led them to this point in the first place. And because the professor specifies it'll send them back to before he even conceived of the time button, we don't know when that was. Theoretically, any episode can be a continuation of the series finale, creating an infinite loop, a never-ending cycle where Futurama can never truly end. There's just something very heartwarming about the idea that Futurama is forever. And it's the kind of sci-fi ending the show needed, rather than one where everyone just grows old and moves on. So, anyone who would think of ruining such a great ending and reviving Futurama again would need to have a damn good reason. They'd need to have a lot of new and unique ideas. They'd really need to have a passion for this legacy TV series. It couldn't just be a soulless cash grab banking on brand recognition. They fucked it up, didn't they?
We're back, baby!
In fairness, it's not the worst thing ever. It's not Teen Titans Go or modern Doctor Who, where they completely butchered what the show was. It's still Futurama, it's just bad Futurama. It's lazy, it's unimaginative. We've got 10 episodes so far, half of which were just based on whatever was going on at the time. The Impossible Stream is about streaming and rebooting a cancelled TV show. Wow, how do they come up with this stuff? How the West was 10100001 is about Bitcoin mining. Related to Items You Viewed is about online shopping. Rage Against the Vaccine is about COVID. And Zap Gets Cancelled is about cancel culture. This doesn't feel like a TV show written by professional writers. This feels like someone opened up their newsfeed and picked out trending topics to make episodes about. Futurama isn't South Park. This isn't cutting-edge biting social commentary. It's just what if modern thing but in futuristic setting. It's not like Futurama has never done episodes about a hot topic before. Attack of the Killer App was just about phone addiction and chasing social media clout. And if we're honest, a lot of Futurama is just parodies of classic movies in the Futurama setting, but they don't usually comprise 50% of the season. So what about the other 5 episodes? Well, 3 of them are just member-berry episodes. Remember when Kif got pregnant and they said in 20 years the kids would sprout legs and come back on land? Well, that episode aired 20 years ago, so Children of the Lesser Bog follows up on that with an episode including Amy and Kif's children. And sure, I remember it, but I don't want to follow up. That's presumably why the writers ended the original episode saying 20 years later, so they could have an interesting premise without having to deal with the consequences of it. They likely didn't expect Futurama to be around 20 years later. You remember the episode where Fry got worms and they make him super smart? That's a pretty memorable episode, probably a fan favourite. You member the worms? Well, they're back in Parasites Regained, in Nibbler's Litterbox, and it's a Dune parody.
It is pronounced Dune. The G is almost silent.
You member the Professor's Time Machine? Well, it's back in I Know What You Did Next Xmas, an episode infinitely less interesting than when it first appeared, and featuring Robot Santa. You member him, right? I say this is a memberberry episode, but almost nothing happens. It's pretty much just Bender and Zoidberg dicking around for 20 minutes with nearly no plot and definitely no payoff. But hey, when images are flashing past in a time machine, you see a scene from Disenchantment, from Matt Groening's other animated TV sitcom, Disenchantment, a show that absolutely sucks, so thank God it's confirmed to take place in the Futurama universe. The two remaining episodes are the only ones that could really be considered original, though that might not be a good thing. All the Way Down is the only episode of the season I really liked. The Professor invents a simulated universe which leads to the simulated Planet Express crew trying to figure out if they're in a simulation or not, and Bender trying to protect them out of sympathy when Amy points out that Bender is also a simulated existence as a robot. It's a pretty interesting sci-fi concept, but if you've watched my Rick and Morty video, you know the ending kinda bugs me, because it implies the Futurama universe is also simulated, with Bender entering the simulated universe as a one-way trip and then another Bender taking over his body, presumably from a higher level simulation. Even if we assume only this episode takes place in a simulated universe with every Bender moving down a level, the top level reality, the real one, should have a dead Bender in it. Since Bender probably isn't going to be dead in future episodes, we can at least assume those episodes also take place in a simulation, but that's just me overthinking a dumb sitcom.
It doesn't matter if I'm real?
Not one bit.
The last episode, I'm not even sure I want to talk about it. This might be the worst Futurama episode ever. I'm genuinely not sure which is worse. This episode or Rise of the Numbericons, the movie. The Rick and Morty episode without Rick based on an unfunny joke in a previous episode. The Prince and the Product is one of Futurama's anthology episodes. Not that you'd know initially because its framing device, if you can even call it that, seems like a normal episode about the Planet Express crew making a delivery to the King of Space, and then it just cuts to, well, garbage, honestly. Futurama, but everyone's a wind-up toy. Futurama, but everyone's a Hot Wheel car. Futurama, but everyone's a rubber duck or Weeble. It is the most boring, pointless, and unfunny episode of Futurama I've ever watched. So yeah, maybe the writers came up with something semi-original, but maybe they shouldn't have.
Oh, Fry, I'm falling head over heels in love with you. Except I can't fall, and I don't have heels.
There was really no good reason to reboot Futurama. Based on the quality of the season and the types of episodes we got, you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that the pitch for the reboot was that the writers had discovered a new well of passion for the series and come up with fresh ideas. This was nothing more than a cash grab. Every concept could have been done with any animated sci-fi sitcom. Rebooting Futurama just let them guarantee viewers without having to put out a quality product because the name alone will sell. Then all they had to do was throw in a bunch of memorable jokes from classic episodes and call it a day.
I'd take a shift myself, but I am already in my pajamas.
They're also stupid, by the way. I discovered that. Bear biologist.
My manwich!
If the quality is going to continue like this, I can only imagine upcoming episodes will have concepts like Slurm releases a bunch of colourful new cans and everyone needs to have them or they're losers. Bender starts selling videos of himself on a robosexual website. They'll bring back the 7-leaf clover from The Luck of the Fryrish. That was a popular episode after all. Then maybe there's a Squid Game parody where Melvar makes them play a bunch of games or die. Oh, wait, there's actually an upcoming episode called Quids Game. Great. If this season was the argument for why Futurama needed to return and ruin the show's perfect ending, it's an argument they've so far failed to make. So all I can do is leave you with the wise, if annoyingly meta, and let's face it, wholly ironic words of Philip J. Fry.
I guess, don't reboot a show if the quality isn't gonna be there.